Hello whisky fans, welcome back. Welcome to the 3rd of December, and this hat is terrible. But not welcome back to this hat is terrible. Welcome, well, in a way, welcome back to the 3rd day of the Master of Malt Whisky Advent Calendar. And you can probably see, well, you probably can't actually, it's probably a waste of time because it's too small, but I've put a leaderboard up here. So I'm going to carry on doing that for everything through the whole 24 drams. So, question is, what have I done so far? I have put the Aerolite Lindsay 10-year-old mystery malt from Master of Malt themselves up the top. I'm expecting that this is probably going to finish top 25%, maybe top 20%. Be a little bit disappointed if there's nothing in here that's better, but I think that's a good solid position for the Aerolite Lindsay. I think it's going to be near the top. Benriach, I think that's going to be slightly above middle, perhaps. But we'll see. I'm almost certainly going to have to take all of these off the wall and reposition them at least once over the course of this, but that's what I've gone with so far. Also interested to see which is going to be the first whisky label which the blue tack peels off and it falls off the wall. It's going to be our cursed whisky, and it will curse forevermore those who drink it. I'll see which one that's going to be. Anyway, day 3. Let's see, where are we? This is another small door. Bet this one's going to be a pain in the arse to get it out, like the first one was. It's another black top. Oh, that was easy. Bunnahabhain, not Bunnahabhain, some people say. Bunnahabhain 12-year-old, single malt Scotch whisky, 46.3%. It's all in the 0.3. It's very important, that 0.3. Do you know why? No, neither do I. No idea. So this is a whisky that I'm very familiar with. I've had a few bottles of this over the years. When I first tried Bunnahabhain 12-year-old, it was back in the bad old days when it was bottled at 40%. And it was chill filtered and probably coloured. I don't actually know if the new expression is coloured or not. I would imagine it's not. But the old edition, which was 40% and chill filtered, was pretty shocking. I think it was the first Islay whisky that I tried. And back then, as it is now, it's an unpeated Islay whisky, so it's not typical of Islay as such. But it really put me off Islay for quite a while, because the old 40% expression was very strange and not very good. But the modern 12-year-old, bottled at the higher strength, is usually much better. Yeah, I need to stop doing that. Benriach 12-year-old Cherrywood should possibly be a little bit concerned at the moment. It may be about to be overtaken. So, Bunnahabhain 12-year-old, I'm actually not going to bother taking notes for this one on my trusty notepad here, because it's a whisky that I've had so many times, and I've had so many bottles of it. I've actually got, I think, 2 bottles of the 12-year-old upstairs, as well as a bottle of the 18, and a bottle of, I think, 2 bottles of peated expressions of Bunnahabhain. Never bought a bottle of the 25-year-old because I think that's horrendously overpriced for what it is, but I do love Bunnahabhain Distillery. I've been there, went there in 2014, and fun little fact that when I was on the ferry going over to Portiskeag on Islay, I had a dram before I set foot on the island, and the whisky that I chose was Bunnahabhain 12-year-old. So this one always reminds me a little bit of getting that ferry from the mainland over to Portiskeag with my dad back in 2014. And one of the reasons why I chose Bunnahabhain 12 is because I was about to spend 2 weeks on the Isle of Islay, and I thought, I'm about to drink a lot of really good, heavily peated whiskey. I'll go for something that's actually not peated at all. Because the Bunnahabhain 12-year-old, contrary to what some people will say in their reviews, is completely unpeated. Now, these days Bunnahabhain do peated expressions, so you may get a little bit of residual peat smoke trapped in the stills, which may carry over into the 12-year-old and the other unpeated expressions. But generally, Bunnahabhain is a heavily sherried and unpeated single malt. So I'd say that it's probably bang in the middle in terms of style between a Highland style and... Actually, I'd say maybe 2/3 Highland, 1/3 Speyside in its distillery profile. And it's a distillery profile that I really like. It's a really old-fashioned place. It's not been touristified at all if you ever visit Bunnahabhain Distillery. It very much looks like a working distillery, and it is a working distillery. At least when I went there 6 years ago, there's just a room, a shop basically, a gift shop that had some bottles of whiskey, and they had a small tasting room and a beautiful pier that goes out into the bay that you can get a great view of the distillery in one direction, and the other direction you get an amazing view of the Paps of Jura. So if anyone out there is planning on making their first trip to Islay anytime soon, make sure that Bunnahabhain is one of the distilleries that you go to, and make sure that it's on a nice day, because it's a lovely place to go. But enough of that, let's see what we've got in the glass. Bunnahabhain 12-year-old is a heavily sherried whiskey. You can see from the colour. I believe that is natural colour. And it's a lovely, rich, reddish golden colour. And that is coming from lots of really high quality sherry casks. It's a lovely, thick and syrupy smell on the nose, and you're getting lots of savoury, musty sherry, and it's a little bit similar to the smell that you get in a Dunwich warehouse, if it's a Dunwich warehouse that's got lots of sherry and port casks. If you've never been to one, you really should, because the air just becomes saturated with not only the smell of whiskey, but this musty, dry, slightly foisty oak and grape, chocolate and nuttiness, and it's actually really nice just being in that environment. And it's a little bit similar to the nose that you get on this Bunnahabhain 12. But it is a very approachable sherry. It's not dry, it's not spicy, it's not meaty. You're getting some lovely milk chocolate and raisins and prunes, lovely nuttiness. Sherbet. There's also, and it's just enough to remind you that this is an Islay whiskey, there's a lovely salty and marine note in this whiskey. And to be fair to the Benriach 12-year-old, because I said in that one there was a little bit of a spirity, youthful note, this is another 12-year-old whiskey and similar ABV, same age in theory, and there is a little bit of youthfulness in this whiskey as well, but it's a different youthfulness. It's a little bit of a sour, doughy, damp oak type youthfulness that you get on the nose of this one, but I'd say that it's even more minor than what I saw on the Benriach 12. Doesn't spoil it at all. It's just a hallmark of what this whiskey is. It's only 12 years old, and you're not going to expect everything to be perfectly rounded off and mellowed. It's a reasonably youthful and punchy, lovely little sherry matured whiskey. Also getting a note on the nose of this whiskey. This is my last note, and I wasn't sure whether to mention this or not because it sounds a bit odd, but there's a little note in there, and some people out there will know what I'm talking about. It's a little bit of a gunpowder note. So I suppose most people are going to be familiar with the smell of fireworks, and that's just reminded me actually that slight gunpowder fireworks note. may actually be a touch of sulphur from some of those sherry casks. But it's really in the background, it's nothing to worry about. It's just an extra little bit of character. Right, let's get on with this. I'm looking forward to this because I do really like the Bunnahabhain 12-year-old. Let's see how it tastes. I'll admit that it's actually been probably a couple of years since I've had a Bunnahabhain 12-year-old, so I've kind of forgotten how good it is. I said that the Ben Riach should be worried that it's about to be overtaken, but Aerolite Lindsay, you anonymous Islay single malt, I think old Lindsay needs to be worried a little bit as well. The palate on this Bunnahabhain 12-year-old, I think it really follows the same path, same journey as that you get with the nose. But I'm just surprised. I'd forgotten how intense and full and sugary and juicy the palate on this whiskey really is. And this is one of the things that is the reason why they should have changed from 40% to 46% decades ago. Because the 40% whiskey, you lost so much of the flavour because it was just so underpowered. And a lot of what you were left with is a little bit like the Jack Daniel's No. 7. A lot of what you were left with was a weak, watery, bitter experience. And the 40% Bunnahabhain 12, it carried a lot of that weak, bitter, salty character, which is still in this whiskey, but bottled at 46.3%. You've got all these other flavours that support it and complement it and accentuate it. It just makes the whiskey so much better being bottled at a proper drinking strength. So, what notes am I getting on the palate of this whiskey? So, obviously quality sherry. There's some dry sherry in there, as well as some meaty, dry, savoury sherry. I think as the palate goes on, you're getting a growing note of sugary grape and prunes, milk chocolate and fruitiness, like Cadbury's fruit and nut milk chocolate. And towards the end, all the sweetness moves on just ever so gracefully into some salty oak territory. And it's just a beautiful progression. It's a really good whiskey. As for the finish, I'm going to say medium length, medium long perhaps, sweet and salty and chocolatey and lovely. Bunnahabhain, and this seems like almost an idiosyncratic thing to say, is definitely up there as one of my favourite Islay distilleries, and I don't care that their peated whiskey is oftentimes a little bit ugly. I don't care if they do peated whiskey or not. If they keep making the 12-year-old and the 18-year-old at Bunnahabhain, I'm going to be a lifelong customer because I really love this stuff. Let's have a little bit more. Reminds me a little bit of the Glendronach 12, because it's both of those whiskies are 12 years old and they taste about as mature as each other. This has got a lot more power because of that higher bottling strength. I suspect that maybe if you bottled this at 40%, which I believe the Glendronach 12-year-old still is bottled at, I think the Glendronach would probably pull ahead a little bit. But the fact is, this is bottled at a proper drinking strength, and because of that, it has got that extra touch of power. And I think that the Bunnahabhain, compared to the Glendronach 12, it's got a little bit more emphasis on the actual oaky notes of the cask and a little bit extra emphasis on the malted barley as well. Whereas the Glendronach 12 is all about that super sweet sherry cask. But they're both fantastic whiskies. So go ahead and let me know in the comments what you think of Bunnahabhain 12-year-old. If you tell me that you hate it, don't necessarily expect a reply, because this is possibly my favourite so far out of the Master of Malt Advent Calendar. It's going to be a tough decision as to who gets the top place now. Choosing between two such whiskies is a nice problem to have. See you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.